Hi, I'm Gini. I've been painting for over 40 years and I use the wet into wet or alla prima method, and I want to share with you what I have learned. You can oil paint too, so let's have some fun. Okay, today we're going to be painting a painting I call Moonlit Lilacs. I've got my canvas prepared. I've got a thin even coat of medium on my canvas. I'm using safflower oil with a little bit of an alkyd dryer. Very thin even coat. And the pattern was traced on using a black transfer paper. We're going to start in the background using very dark Prussian blue with a little bit of black in it. I want this pattern or this background colors to be very dark, and I'm just going to go in amongst all my pattern leaves and the lilacs and look for the empty spaces and just put in very dark color. Now I may have to go back over this later to get it even darker, but for now I'm just seeking out and looking for those very dark dark blue places. This is the sky behind there, and it's at night, so this is very dark. Like I said, I'm taking Prussian blue, adding some black to it, trying to get it just as dark as I can. You could actually probably paint this on a black canvas, which would help you get that really dark color back behind there. I didn't do that this time, but you could do that if you wanted to. Again, very dark. I'm using a 3/4 inch flat brush. I'm painting on a wet surface, which lets me get that paint on there very quickly and easily. I'm not being too careful about getting onto my lines except right next to my moon. I'm carefully going right next to the moon, very close to those lines there. But on the lilacs and the flowers, I'm not too worried about getting up onto the lines. As a matter of fact, I want to make sure I touch, and if not, even go over those lines so that I don't have any white spaces in there that I have to go back later on. Again, looking for those dark areas, getting it nice and dark. Quick strokes. I'm not trying to be real careful or paint in any certain direction. I'm just getting the paint on there very loose in the background. Dark, dark, dark. Really want this to be dark back in here. Even up here in the top, I'm getting some nice dark started back up in there. Going back over some of these areas to get it even darker. Letting it fade off a little bit here at the top, being a little bit lighter. Darkening back up. Down here in the bottom left corner, I definitely want to make sure that I get this nice and dark. It's kind of our darkest area down in here. Same thing a little bit over on the right hand side, and then it just kind of gets lighter as it goes to the top. Then I'm going to take my mop brush. Mop brush used very, very gently, just the very tips of the brush will kind of let you get in here and soften the brush strokes out, but you're just going to use the very tip of the mop brush. Don't do much pushing, no pushing, just very, very soft, gentle strokes to get those brush strokes out. Softening colors tends to push them more into the background, and that's what we want to do with these colors, is just really soften them and push them into the background. Very gentle strokes, no pushing at all. Wipe the tip of my mop brush off. I always make sure I do that to get that excess paint off there, and set that brush aside. Next, let me show you some of the color mixes that I have on my palette. I've got some yellow ochre, or cad yellow and white. I've got a little bit of different shades of blue. I've taken a little bit of phthalo blue and white, a little bit of dioxazine purple and white, and I've just given myself some pale shades, and we're going to start working in our on the moon area. So I'm giving myself some very pale shades, color mixes. And I'm going to start with a little bit of phthalo blue, very, very pale. I'm going to go right next to the edge of the moon, right along that the border. Very, very pale, just to kind of soften this edge down a little bit so that it blends into the background just a touch. Getting a little bit of the pale purple color in here now. Now don't worry if your moon gets a little out of shape. We're going to go back and we're going to make sure we have it nice and round once we get these colors in there. Right in here is the lightest part of the moon. So right now I'm just getting some of those pale shades that I created back in here on the side that I know is going to be on the darker side. Blues and purples, a little bit of grays. I'm going to add a little bit of that pale yellow in here. Straighten my edge up a little bit. Just kind of rounding it up, adding a little bit more of the shadow along that bottom edge. Now these colors are going to kind of mix together a little bit in here, but it really is all those pale shades. We want our moon to stay very light, so we don't want any solid colors in here. Just going back and forth. I've kind of given you some lines in there to show you where the highest, where the brightest lights are going to be. So I want to make this moon appear round, so I have to have darks and midtones and lights. So I'm kind of putting in some darks and heading towards the midtones, which is just lighter shades of those same colors. Look at your reference material here and you can kind of see where to place these things. Picked up a little bit of yellow ochre and white. Picked up some of my brighter cad yellow and white. Kind of blending that out together. The other thing you can always do is you can go back in with your darker color behind the color that's behind there, and you can always get that shape back in there by using the colors in the background. But I want that line to be nice and soft. I don't want it to be a hard line. That will set that moon into the background. A little bit of grays back in here on this edge. Okay, continuing on with my grays and purples, blues, along this edge, right up into my lilacs. Very loose, not trying to make this all one color. I'm letting these colors kind of blend back and forth into each other. Going back along this back edge just to kind of darken that just a little bit more in there. Very softly blend it. Softly blending these colors together. I want to leave those different shades in there though, so I don't want to over blend it and turn them all into one color. Very important not to do that. Let those different colors show. Darkening that edge just a touch more up here. It's really going to give you the sense of roundness if you have those darker shades in there. Darken that edge, darken that corner a little bit more. There we go. That makes that pop just a little bit more. You can see the difference between those two shades. A little bit along this edge again. Careful that I keep the roundness. You can always go back and adjust that, so don't overwork or over worry about that at this point. Again, a little dark along that edge just to get the sense of it having 3 dimensions. Add a little bit more purples in there. Not too dark. Lighten it up just a little bit. Because I'm going to have so much purple in my painting, I just didn't want to add a little bit of that purple up into the moon. Again, just darkening this left side, adjusting my edges. And you'll notice I've left that center area white. I haven't painted anything there. I'm going to wipe my brush out really well, and then I'm going to start in with some lighter colors. Some of the light blue. Really try to get that nice and pale blue. Lighter, a little lighter. Some of that pale yellow and white. Very, very pale yellow and white. Now I've got those 3 shades in there, dark, medium, and light. Can really work on this light area a little bit more. So I've got all that. Now it's looking round. My moon is looking 3-dimensional with those colors in there. Going along some of these edges of this light area just to darken a little bit so that it does stand out a little bit more. Light against dark, dark against light will always brighten the light areas and darken the dark areas. Just want those to be odd shape, not same, not look the same all the way around. Just a little bit more blending. Now I'm taking even lighter color, a little bit of white in here, very pale yellow. I want to brighten that whole center section even more, very pale. And I'm going to try to put the paint on there and then walk away without over blending it. Very important not to over blend that. And I'm putting in there in odd areas, not over blending or putting it all in the same spot. Now I'm picking up some straight white, trying to get a little bit thicker on my brush. I may go back and do some more of this after I get the rest of the painting painted, just to really brighten up that center area. Again, I'm trying to do it not blend it all over, but do it in different areas so that it really sparks up those patterns that we've got going on up there. I'm wiping my brush off every time I go back to get clean paint. Just looking for areas that I might need to lighten it up a little bit or darken it a little bit at this point. Okay, now that I've got the moon almost finished, I'm going to start with my, I'm going to add my leaves. I'm going to go pick out all the leaves in the background, and I'm going to use sap green and black, a very, very dark green, almost black, and I'm just going to start picking out those leaves. Now I like to do this just very quickly. You take your point of your brush and you just sit it down, and then you go around the edges, and then you just kind of fill in the center. Very simple. I'm not going to fuss with these too much. We're still just doing the underpainting. This gives us something to blend into. When we add our highlights, we'll have this dark color to blend into. And just go around the edge, fill in the center. You can always add more leaves if you think this your painting needs more leaves around the lilacs. So don't worry about missing some or forgetting some. You can always add more. can look at your pattern and see where I've placed them. Try to cover up any light areas or white canvas areas while you're doing this. I've kind of tried to do these a little randomly, you know, so that it looks like a lilac bush out in the moonlight. There's some dark ones down in here. Especially along the bottom edge, there's some leaves. And I'm leaving the lilacs. I've not painted any lilacs. I'm just looking for leaves. While I'm at it, there's a couple of stems in here. I'm just going to kind of base coat those in. While I'm there, I'm going to just use that same color, just get a little bit of the dark green on those stems. We'll highlight those when we highlight our leaves. Still picking out leaves. I will go back after I get these leaves done and take a little bit of sap green with some yellow ochre in it and add some highlights out on the edges of some of my leaves, keeping in mind the direction that the light is coming from. So it's mostly going to be on the tips of the leaves as they are pointed towards the moon. Not a whole lot down in the dark areas up here, but I want to make sure that I get a little bit of variation in those colors in those leaves. Okay, now that we've got our leaves base coated in, we're going to start on our lilacs. Now the colors that I'm using here, I'm starting with the darks, and I'm taking the cobalt violet, just wiping my brush out, taking a little bit of cobalt violet, and I'm going to use a small brush. It's about 1/4 of an inch wide, and I'm using, it's a flat, which means it has a flat tip. And I'm going to start right at the base, and I'm going to try to paint very loosely here. Just notice that my strokes are real loose. Cobalt violet. I'm thinking about where's the light coming from. Really getting dark down here along the bottom. Cobalt violet, a little bit of dioxazine purple, maybe adding a little bit of black into my cobalt violet to get, it's a dark purple color, but it's really dark down in here. Again, I'm really trying to paint very loosely. As I go up into the light a little bit more, I'm going to switch to straight dioxazine purple. Going back and forth a little bit, again keeping in mind where the light is coming from. Letting some of my white of the canvas show through. Now I'm getting a little bit more, a little lighter here towards the tip where it's going to be sticking out into the moonlight, and I've just added a little bit of white to my dioxazine purple. Maybe even a little bit of alizarin crimson, keeping the base very dark and just getting the tip light. There's a stem right in there, so I'm going to add that stem. I just picked up a little bit of my dark green. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit more white, maybe a little bit of different colors, add white to different colors, to my different purples, adding white to the different purples, and really sparking up that tip. Here I'm trying to make a little bit more petal shapes. Before I was just trying to be very loose. Now I'm thinking about maybe a few little petals that look like the flowers of a lilac. And I'm also thinking right about where that light might hit that lilac. And this is really the basic lilac treatment that I do for all of these, creating lights and darks, getting a little bit brighter in some areas, really paying attention to where I'm putting that light. Right on the tip, going back, adding just a little bit more of a spark of lighter pink, white, really getting the teardrop shape in there a little bit more for those flowers. Down here in the shadows, I'm really keeping these dark down in here. Cobalt violet, dioxazine purple, still very loose, very free with those strokes. Paying more attention to those outside edges than I am to what's going on in the center. Keeping it very dark, but adding a little bit of highlight where I think the light might sneak through there. Darkening these leaves down in here. Adding a little bit of purple, maybe there's some other little things going on in there, but just keeping it very dark. There's another lilac here that's down in the shadows, and I'm just leaving it very dark. up here where the lilacs are in the light a little bit more. I'm going to start a little earlier with my lighter colors. Again, keeping all these strokes very loose and free. Turning my brush this way and that. Kind of thinking about the little flower shapes, but really not trying to make them be too obvious. A little bit lighter, a little bit more, adding a little bit more alizarin crimson maybe in here to get a little pinker. Not too much, but a little bit. Kind of gives it a little bit more shape and form. Now these lilacs that are over here on this side, I've got the shape and form of the others. Now I'm going to think about the ones that are up here at the top. They're hanging down. They're hanging down into the light. Maybe there's one right up here in the corner that I need to add. Keeping those a little brighter, a little bit more dioxazine purple with maybe a touch of alizarin crimson in there. Keeping the separation between one lilac and another by making sure that it's darker than the previous one or lighter than the previous one. But these kind of all come pointing down into the light. That one's a little bit behind another one, so I'll leave it like that. Again, just adding some separation. I'm keeping these lilacs a lot lighter, adding a little bit more dioxazine purple with a little bit of the pink, alizarin crimson and white into these to keep them a lot brighter because they're in front of the moon and they're going to get a lot more light, especially on the tips. Now I'm going to go back over, now that I've got all the shapes in, now I can go back and really spark up some of those flowers that are right out there in the light. Add a little bit more detail, a little bit more petal. I can do that to each of these, really thinking about where the light might strike these. Definitely add some darks back in if I've lost any of the dark. Make sure that those lilacs have a dark base where the light is not going to hit them. There's another stem right there. Bring that in. Going back to all these up here at the top, adding some definite petals, definite flower shapes, definite lights. Now that I've added all my lights, I can call this one finished. I hope you enjoyed this Moonlit Lilacs, and I hope you come back and paint with me again. Thank you.